What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am finally back with another album review, as it's been a couple of weeks since you last saw an album review from me, but I'm back as we are nearing the end of the year, nearing the end of reviews. After this week, only 3 more weeks of reviews left in the year for me. And, well, we're kicking off a kind of a big weekend for underground metal, as we are talking about the latest offering from 1914, VIRIBUS Unitis. This comes out on November 14th, this time on Napalm Records, and this is the band's 4th studio full-length overall. For those who don't know, this is a Ukrainian-based blackened death metal, death doom, black metal band, kind of like a hybrid of all that wrapped up into one. And this is their 4th album overall. I became a fan of this band with their last album, Where Fear and Weapons Meet. I thought that was an unbelievable album. In fact, I think that made my year-end list for 2021. So it's been a little while since we've had an album from them. Here we are 4 years later and we get a new one. And, well, I will say this one is a tiny bit different from the last album. I will say this album, I think, has more hooks, more melody, but still retaining that, like, dark, somber, and at times heavy and evil sound that this band has to offer. So, of course, like with all 1914 albums, you just have an intro and an outro track, war in, war out, kind of like old radio effect kind of things. But the main meat of the songs, kicking off with the self-titled song 1914, The Siege of Przemysl, or I'm not going to be able to pronounce a good chunk of these names, so forgive me for that. But the song 1914, I'll just say, starts off immediately with like big black metal tremolo melodies and blast beats. Dare I say, to the level of bands like Watain, for example. Like, I got a lot of nods of Watain with, and when I heard these tremolo melodies and blast beats, I was just like, whoa, this is hyper aggressive, yet still very catchy. And for the most part, the vocals on this entire album kind of sound like they sit in between black metal and death metal, but this song is really, I think, where most of the black metal really comes out, not only in the vocals, but in the music. Like, there is more black metal going on here, whereas most of the other moments where it gets black metal oriented, it's more like blackened death. But this track, it does get a little bit thrashy, and then it gets into this big gallop, and dare I say, one of the catchiest hooks on the entire album immediately. But you do go into like big doom grooves with heavier riffs that feel closer to death doom. And of course, like, the screams are awesome, his growls are pretty strong too, and then for the most part, for the rest of the album, like, the extreme vocals sound like they're just right in between both black metal and death metal. But then we go into 1915, Easter Battle for the Zwenen Ridge. This one, I think, definitely goes for more of that, like, black and death metal vibe, like a combination of, I would say, Behemoth and Necrophobic. Like, it has, like, the big, vicious brutality of Behemoth, but with the more melodic, catchy hooks of Necrophobic, kind of like blending the two together. Again, bringing out a little bit of thrash into the mix, but the tremolo riffs on here are even more aggressive than the self-titled song. And then, all of a sudden, bass melodies, it gets pretty dissonant, almost like immolation at times, but it's far more melodic, like dissonant melodies. There's these like really cool chants, and I love how it just builds up nicely to the end of the song with these big melodic doom sections. And this was the longest track, singular track, of the album at a little over 9 minutes, but man, it just packed so much punch in those 9 minutes. 1916, the Sudrial Offensive. This is really where the doom starts to come in a little bit. Like, the melodies, the doomy melodies that start this off, kind of gave me nods to classic death doom bands like Asphyx, but also Hooded Menace. And then you get into big tremolos and blast beats. But then You get to these big lumbering stomps and grooves and double time stomps, very akin to Bolt Thrower. And Bolt Thrower's like Bolt Thrower worship kind of shows up intermittently on this album. Whenever it gets into these like big gallops and double time stomps, it immediately makes me think of Bolt Thrower, definitely. But then it takes a sudden shift towards melodic death metal territory, but I would say closer to like Amon Amarth, but with a more somber tone to it. Whereas like with Amon Amarth, it's mostly like heavy but triumphant. Whereas here it's like you're taking Amon Amarth but making it more somber sounding, but with that energy with the faster tempos. Then 1917, the Isonzo Front. We go back more towards that Blackened Death vibe, but still bringing in more mellow death. So this is definitely more on the necrophobic side of the scale. Big blasts, big tremolos. Dare I say, it gets a little more technical. Like, this is maybe the most technical song on the album. Like, the guitar work is just flying on this track. But you still get grooves and, like, death metal chugs coming in. More double time. But I actually really, really like the clean melody at the very end. Then you get into the next three tracks, which are three parts of one song, 1918. Part 1, Wounded in Action. Part 2, Prisoner of War. And then Part 3, A Duty to Escape. Wounded in Action, for the most part, just pretty much stays straight up death doom. Asphyx, Hooded Menace. I would even throw in a band like Spectral Voice a little bit in there too. Like, it's very murky, it's very dark sounding, very dissonant as well, and very haunting as well. Like, it's got this haunting, spooky quality to it, as well as some really cool chants to kind of just add more to the darkness and the haunting atmosphere. Whereas Prisoner of War starts off very much on the death doom scale with a bass and drum part, darker melodies, clean melodies show up, but then you do get more blasts and tremolos that show up, and it does get really, really sad sounding towards the end. And then Part 3, A Duty to Escape, probably one of the more melodic tracks on the entire album. You get these big lumbering gallops and Bolt Thrower moments, but like the melodies and even then the vocals gets more melodic. Like, there's special guest vocals from Aaron Stainthorpe from My Dying Bride, who's doing the clean vocals on this track, and he definitely adds a morose quality to this track for sure. And then 1919, The Home Where I Died, very much like a piano piece, but it is beautiful, it is sad, it is atmospheric. Great clean vocals. I forget the name of the vocalist they had for this track, but it is still just a big piano dirge with violin that shows up, and it's wonderfully done. Production-wise, this was a well-balanced mix. It was produced by Alexander Backlund, who's currently live bassist for In Mourning, but mastered by Tony Lindgren. So this was a Fascination Street studio recording. Makes me surprised that Jens Bogren didn't step in on this one, but his protege, Tony Lindgren, did. So still get traces of Jens Bogren on this mix for sure, but it is a massive sound. Like I said, I think they took everything that they did on Where Fear and Weapons Meet, but just made it bigger, more grandiose, more catchy, but also at the same time more somber, more morose, but also at times a little heavier and a little faster in spots. So it's like this album's like a tale of two halves. The first half, a little bit more on the blackened death metal side. Second half gets a little bit more on the death doom side. So it's kind of like a nice hybrid of both is what they're going for with this album in particular. As far as any negatives, I have none. I will say this is perhaps on par, if not just a little bit better than Where Fear and Weapons Meet, only because the hooks come out more on this album. Like, there's a lot of moments on here where it's like, oh my god, this is some catchy stuff. This is another 5 out of 5. Man, my year-end list is gonna be difficult to determine album of the year, because I've got quite a few 5s show up in recent months. So, yeah, this is another masterwork from this Ukrainian. Now I think they should be considered legend at this point. If you are a fan of I would say like Necrophobic, Asphyx, Hooded Menace, definitely Bolt Thrower, and also even like Watain, Marduk, Amon Amarth, Behemoth, Sulfur Aeon, Immolation. Check this out. This is awesome, wonderfully crafted metal. But of course, those are just my opinions. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But until next time, thank you for watching. Keep your horns high and your dreams wet.